All right, now we are going to go live to Minneapolis, where CNN's Camila Bernal is standing by. Camila, we spoke with you yesterday after night 6 of these protests. Night 7 looking very different. We just heard from George Floyd's brother here calling for peace. Can you give us a sense of what happened last night and where things stand this morning?
Yeah, so I want to start out with what you mentioned about George Floyd's brother, Terrence. He was here, and it was just an emotional, very heavy, and very moving moment for the protesters and for the family. We saw him as he took a knee right in this area. That is, of course, the area where George Floyd lost his life. And when his brother came out here, he was on his knees, and he was essentially breaking down and crying, and so many of the members of the community tried to lift him up and tried to just encourage him in terms of moving forward. And then he turned around and decided to speak to many of the protesters, and he asked for peace. He asked for people to peacefully protest and not cause any violence. And so that is essentially what they got last night. People here were mostly peaceful. People continue to just remain in this area for the most part, and they're praying, holding hands, talking to each other, having conversations about race, about what happened to George Floyd, and about how to move forward. And that is sort of what they're doing here and what they're hoping that will happen across the country, because, of course, as you've probably seen, it has not been the same in many other areas around the country. And what they want is for the peace here to sort of spread throughout all the other states in the U.S.
We hear from U.S. President Donald Trump saying he is threatening to bring in the military. Are you hearing from the ground those who are there in part of a peaceful protest, seeing the reaction, seeing people get tear gassed in order to make room for a photo op? What has the response been there? And no doubt that might be fueling what we've seen in different areas in the U.S.
Yeah, a lot of the protesters say this is essentially adding flames to this fire. They were not very welcoming of that message, because they're trying to protest peacefully, and then they're seeing a completely different picture coming out of Washington, D.C. And so it is a difficult balance for a lot of the lawmakers here who want the support of the White House, who want to continue working with the White House, but who don't necessarily want the military to be in their states. The governor here is even saying that he's sending back some of the National Guard troops because it is not needed here. So in some areas, depending on where you are in the United States, they're not welcoming that message from the president and saying they're not interested in having that military interaction with a lot of the protesters who are simply trying to be peaceful. So it's a difficult balance for a lot of the lawmakers, and it's, of course, yet to be seen what happens moving forward as they continue to process that message from the president.
Camila, I'm just looking at the visuals behind you there. There was a gentleman that was actually sweeping and cleaning up, and there are people just paying their respects, kneeling silently. Can you give us a picture or a sense of that, what's happening there, and how big it is behind you? Because we can only see a small picture here, but how big that memorial site actually is.
Yeah, and I'll step out of the way so that you can get a better picture. This is not just one member of the community. So many of them, we've seen them throughout the morning. They come in the early morning hours to clean up, to sweep, to just pick up everything that was left behind. And he's not the only one. And so this is essentially an intersection. And so it's not a huge area, but it is the intersection of where it all happened. And so there's a number of flowers and so many messages that have been left here. People have written messages even on the street with chalk, and so it is just very moving to see what everybody is doing in this area in particular, because it's not just one, it's not just two, it's multiple people who are really doing anything they can to keep this area clean, to keep this area peaceful, and to show that that is what they're here for, to have those conversations and to try to figure out how to move forward instead of the violence.
Camila, we appreciate your time as always this morning, and we will check back in with you during our national hour at 9 o'clock Eastern here. Thank you so much. That's Camila Bernal live in Minneapolis.